All right, guys, welcome to Audio Workstations Week 2. We're going to get ourselves started here pretty quickly. I saw some discussions here, just reading some of your posts concerning some questions you guys had concerning some quick keys. And I think what's probably happened to you guys is, it looks like some of you may have neglected to read something that none of us ever read, but it's important. This is from your Getting Started manual. This actually has to do with installation of Pro Tools and features that could potentially be already hijacked or taken over by the Macintosh unless you go and you disable these items. So go ahead and take a look at this. This is actually on page 30, and I'll go ahead and I'll send this doc. You will note that this PDF doc that I'm forwarding to you right now actually pertains to HD systems, but HD systems and LE systems, the software is essentially the same. They function the same. The only difference that you're going to find is once you get to an HD system, we're talking about dealing with dedicated HD processor chips that are now taking care of all of the processing for your system. So some of you are actually questioning track height questions, and if we go and take a look here, all the answers were correct. If you're holding down Control and Option and using your arrow keys, notice that's going to adjust all tracks. I believe I still have some of my features disabled, but placing your selector in any track and just simply holding Control is going to resize just that track. I currently, as you can see, have this already set up for other options, just like that is explained here in this document, this PDF doc. So while it's never fun to have to read through a bit of manual to try and get your software up and running, if you're going to start utilizing these key commands, you need to be aware that these key commands have potentially been hijacked by your Mac, and so you're going to have to disable these to get back full functionality of Pro Tools. All of these were covered in detail in the required viewing lecture as well as in the reading material. So for those of you that were questioning the actual answer to that particular question, there you go, there's your answer. And unfortunately, it sounds like some of you just hadn't set up your Mac properly and disabled these features that were previously hijacked by the Mac OS X. So this is going to happen from time to time. These aren't new key commands, by the way. These have always been there for, all the way back to version 6 of Pro Tools. What's happened, though, is the OS of Macintosh, as Mac starts to try to use some of its key commands, that's now trying to hijack some of them that would be taken up for Pro Tools. So just keep that in mind. I saw a bunch of questions flying around, and I just want to make sure we got that one down and nailed down right away. So take a look at that documentation. Go and optimize your system. And of course, we never have to want to go and read a getting starting manual to using a bit of software. But unfortunately, when you're using something that's this technical, you're going to have to. And these things are clearly stated in the Getting Started manual. So just wanted to get that out there and wide open for you guys to actually see that those functions are still there. They work properly. You just have to go and disable the features in your Mac OS X that are currently hijacking them. George Sadler has a question here. The question and answer says Control up and down arrow, so I thought none of the above. Well, yeah, as I just mentioned, George, control will actually take care of one track at a time, whereas if you add option's going to be the modifier. Remember, we showed that inside of Pro Tools, I can show and hide tracks just by clicking on one little icon here to show and hide a track, and if you hold option, it's going to do the same thing to all. So the lesson here of the day is that option inside of Pro Tools is going to do one of two things. If you've got a pen handy, I'd go ahead and write this one down because you're going to find this to be true in nearly every situation when it comes to adding option. Option will be a modifier key that will do one of two things. It will either do, inside of Pro Tools, the very same thing to all that you're trying to accomplish to one, or it will do the opposite of. For instance, in the case of our trim tool, the trim tool, by nature of its behavior, if it gets anywhere beyond the halfway point in any region, it's going to go ahead and automatically turn the opposite direction, assuming that you want to trim that end of that region. However, if you hold down option, you'll notice that will actually change the trim tool's control. So in this example, it's doing the opposite of. Or if we wanted to make all of the outputs or inputs be the same, if I just hold down option, I'll probably need to turn on Keycaster for you guys as well. Let me do that real quick so you guys can see my keystrokes. Awesome. Now I got Keycaster going. You'll notice option on Keycaster doesn't show you anything unless you add an actual modifier to it. Now we see option along with my arrow key. So just be aware sometimes Keycaster is not going to pick up all the key commands. I typically am going to shout out my key commands as I go along throughout our session. But I just want to give you some prime examples. So in this case, if I were to hold down option and assign every single one of these tracks to go out of, I don't know, bus 15 and 16, notice holding down option does the same thing to all. So in this case, it's doing the same thing to all. So take a look. That information was covered in detail. It was covered within the required viewing session as we went through and actually showed you all of those different functions and how to resize your individual tracks, as well as I went over that with you guys last week in our live stream as well. All right, so we got our project here, and for those of you that are just joining us, I am going to do probably about a 10-minute bit of review. So if you were hanging out with me last week, you don't have to turn me off at this point and walk away. But I do want to at least catch some people up to speed. Some of you who have maybe not been to last week's live stream session, just kind of give you a brief overview of where we're already at. Typically, I'm going to do this bit that you guys will see here as far as reviewing where we got these files from at the beginning of each of the sessions. And it's really just to kind of help the latecomers that haven't been to one of the review sessions before, and that way they can see where we're getting these source materials and how we're using them. So this song right here is actually taken from the Daba music website. In a moment here, I'm going to navigate there and show it to you. And notice that we have the individual stems here. And you guys heard me audition these at the beginning of class. So if I solo this out, we've got just the raw vocals for this track. You dream and crash, you hope in love. Solo out the bass with the vocals, and you've got now the bass and the vocals. So what this is this website's going to end up giving us the individual stems. A stem is usually going to be a mix down. For instance, when we see the drums, these drums, we're going to hear more than just one drum sound. This is going to be a stem where the drums have all been comped down. Now, when we're done with our final project, we're actually going to be mixing down to comp tracks as well, so you'll understand how this process got here. But understand that this is all of the drums for this artist track. And they've given these tracks to us for use, not for us to be able to go out and sell these, but for use in an educational purpose, or in the case of this website, it's actually for you guys to win prizes. So let's take you over to Daba Music and show you what that's all about. So if we go to the website itself, here is the website. This is a free website. You guys can sign up. In fact, I want you guys to start on your project right away. So if you haven't already picked a song, that's okay, but I want you to do that tonight. I happen to see that no matter what, we do these sessions throughout the entire month, but I still know that there are students that wait for the very last week to start their project. And if you're waiting to start in the very last week, you're just going to fight an uphill battle with trying to get everything accomplished at once. So here, when we're in the Daba Music website, you want to go ahead and go to the Opportunities tab. When you go to the Opportunities tab, here's an artist here called Should I Have Gone to Bed? Or at least this is going to be the name of the song. So we click on the artist here and we can actually audition the song. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
I only miss you at midnight, but when that lonely clock strikes, that's when I wish you were here. The angel knows it's not right, but the devil's in my heart tonight, whispering things in my ear. So down my cup.
Cool, so that gives you a little taste of the song. Now, should I decide that I want to enter into this remix, notice here it gives you a prize value here of $1,000, and you'll be featured on the actual album itself. So not only is this a really good exercise in just trying to learn what a remix is all about, it actually is an opportunity for you to enter in your own works and potentially win these prizes, as well as appear on the artist's album or single. So should I choose to use this one, I would enter the opportunity. Now, before I do this, I want to warn you guys only have 3 opportunities. So be really picky and choosy about what song you pick, because you only have 3 different artists that you can download for free once you join up with Daba. Now, if you have a paid account, you can download any of the artists that you find underneath the Opportunity tab. I happen to have a paid account, but it just happens to be that many of the times I find artists on here that I like, and sometimes I actually enter into the contest myself. But for you guys, understand with a free account, you're only going to get 3 opportunities. So let's go back and see what other options we have here. Take a look at this artist. We'll audition their music.
Dancing in the stars to the beat of the drum machine. Now here I go, I feel it in my body and my soul. And I know, you said that can't take me down. And I know, you said that can't take me down.
Okay, so let's just go ahead and suppose that this is the artist that I want to download the files for. We're going to go ahead and we're going to go over here to the side where it says Enter Opportunity. A really good question came up, so I want to go ahead and hit on it. I believe it was Douglas asked about using just the plugins that are inside of Pro Tools. Yeah, basically you really do need to stick with just what Pro Tools gives you. There's also some really good chatter earlier about Pro Tools 11, and I know some of you guys are receiving emails about Pro Tools 11. Understand currently Pro Tools 11 is not supported in MPBS. We are not using Pro Tools 11. And so immediately somebody's probably saying, well, why not? It's the latest, it's the greatest. Why aren't we using Pro Tools 11? Well, here's the deal. Pro Tools 11, while it is the latest and greatest, and I'm very happy it's here, number one, I don't own it yet. And it's not that the school hasn't made an arrangement to provide it. There's actually some more technical issues outside of that. It's always better to look before you leap. We've always heard this adage in the past, especially when it comes to software and being right in the middle of a project. Right now, there's some current big problems with Pro Tools 11. When I say they're problems, they're not necessarily problems unless you understand what they are. Pro Tools 11 has abandoned the RTAS plugin format. Well, what is RTAS? It stands for Real-Time Audio Suite. So it's basically the plugin format that DigiDesign has been using for, a good at least 16 or 17 years. They've now abandoned it and gone with a platform called AAE, Avid's Audio Engine. Now, the problem with this is that manufacturers have not actually ported over all their plugins for AAE, Avid's Audio Engine, this new plugin format that will be specifically used inside of Pro Tools 11. So what that means is that things like your virtual instruments, they're not ready. They're not updated yet. So if you make the jump to Pro Tools 11, well, great, you've got some of the greatest, latest, brand new software, but there aren't plugins that are ready for the format. Some of the manufacturers are ready, but not all. So that's the main reason why we're holding off on Pro Tools 11. As you are probably already aware, whenever a brand new piece of software comes out, there are known bugs that are going to come up, and that's why updates come out, because somebody will find something that an engineer didn't catch or didn't see being a problem or a conflict, and someone using Pro Tools in maybe a non-traditional way, or maybe even a very traditional way, will stumble into something that wasn't a known issue. And so these kind of bugs need to get flushed out of the system. Imagine I'm working on a project right now with Mariah Carey, and she shows up to my system, and I was working fine on Pro Tools 10, and I decided to update to Pro Tools 11 before she showed up. So she shows up the next day. I've just upgraded to Pro Tools 11, and half of my plugins aren't there and available to facilitate the session. Pretty major issue. So what's going on right now is this is a transitional phase. And in the transitional phase, we're going to look before we leave, and we're not going to jump to Pro Tools 11 right away. We're going to stick with 10.3.6, which is running very smoothly. It's not even actually 10.3.6. They're saying it's not qualified for Mountain Lion, but I'm actually running it flawlessly on Mountain Lion. Many times, DigiDesign will say something's not qualified, and that means that they haven't actually truly had enough people on the ground testing it to make sure that it's going to be a stable, a viable option yet. So whenever they say something is not necessarily supported, that doesn't mean it won't work. As you can see, if we take a look at my version of Pro Tools, we're actually using a version that is currently actually not even supported, but I'm not running into any issues at all. So 10.3.6. Unless it was qualified over the weekend, it's currently not qualified, which just means it may or may not work. So the latest qualified version is actually 10.3.5, but I haven't been running into any issues, and I don't suspect that you will either. Okay, so in that whole lesson about looking before you leap, here's a good example. So this is why we're going to be sticking with Pro Tools 10.3.6. It's not that we're trying to stay behind the curve, although in this case we are, because we're actually protecting ourselves from painting ourselves into a corner in a situation where we can't actually get the work done that we need to get done. And major studios are going to wait to do any kind of studio upgrade until they have seen that it is qualified and tested by many users, because they simply don't have the time to have a major artist in front of them and have downtime to where the work can't get done. Frederick had a really good question. I don't have a problem with you using something outside of Pro Tools. The only problem would be that you would actually have to render it down or record it inside of Pro Tools. So the easiest option for right now is just stick with what's already there. There's already plenty of excellent virtual instruments inside of Pro Tools that are not going to give you any issues at all. So if you're wanting to use a plugin that is not provided with Pro Tools, just make sure that you render out that file. Otherwise, when I receive your project, I may or may not have that plugin. I do have a very large plugin library, just simply because I've been purchasing plugins for 16 years now. So, but that's not to say I'm going to have every single plugin that you guys own, and it's just not feasible to think that every studio would either. So anytime you're going to use something outside of what DigiDesign offers, just understand that you're going to have to render that down. So what I'm going to do is let's go back to in Daba, and let's determine that we do want to use this file, because this is the materials I want to get up and running with today. So let's go ahead and let's get at it. Now remember, you guys only have 3 opportunities, so I'm going to go ahead and enter in my opportunity. I have unlimited, again, because I have a paid account. You guys don't need to have a paid account to pull this off. You can do it just fine with a free account. Now, once I go to enter opportunity, if you scroll down here, you'll see some legal jargon that's just basically saying, hey, we're going to come sue the living pants off you if you try to sell this in any way. So, of course, you're going to accept and continue. It's just basically a clause letting you know that you cannot go out and use these works in any way. These are already copywritten materials by the artists themselves. Now, once I hit continue, here's an important step. This is nice. This particular song has a lot of stems to it. This will be nice because it'll help us break out all the parts into the individual parts. So now once you're at this page, do not leave this page, because if you leave the page, you're not going to be able to get back here to download these stems. So once you enter into the opportunity, and once you agree to the terms and conditions, scroll down and you want to choose download all stems. Of course, you can download individual stems, but I think you're going to want all of them, so might as well just go ahead and download all the stems. Now you can see my stems are downloading. If we take a look at my download manager, this should take a little while. So in that process, if you guys have any questions, let's go ahead and take some questions. Yeah, Douglas, you mentioned about balancing down anything that you use as new audio. And you're saying that it wouldn't be apparent that you had written MIDI stuff? Well, just leave that MIDI track there. You don't have to delete your MIDI track. You could simply hide that MIDI track. And to hide a track, you would just go off to your show hide or your tracks menu here and just click on any of the chiclets of items that you want to hide. So about a minute here left before we get the song downloaded. Question from Bradley. Audition Daba deals with the final project. Yes. So here's basically how each of our live stream sessions work. We want you guys to get started on your final project from week 1. In week 1, we already showed you guys how to import files. So why not go ahead and import the stems from your final project that you're going to be using all month long. So this is kind of helping you guys to baby step each week along the way to see what it is that we're looking for in a final project and how to achieve some of the goals of what it is that we're looking for in the final project. So each time you guys come see me on Monday evening, this is what we're going to be doing here together. There is usually a Thursday session as well, so there are 2 sessions. Thursday session is generally a review, a question and review session. Unfortunately, Brad is actually going to be out of town this Thursday. So this Thursday's review session will actually be an archive of the previous month's review session, but it'll basically be the same materials because the materials haven't changed. So you can be in this course and be using versions 8, 9, or 10, but currently not 11. But understand, in between each of those versions, really not a lot has changed inside of Pro Tools. If we were to really point out some of the main differences of what has changed from version 8 to version 9, the main difference was that you're no longer tied to the inbox. If you're on version 8, then you know really well that you can't go use any audio interface you want. You have to use the DigiDesign audio interface. So from version 8 to version 9, the only thing different with the software is that the software is no longer tied to the actual interface. It's now tied to the iLok itself. Now from version 9 to 10, the only thing that really changed was the name over here, the Clips menu. This used to be called the Regions menu or the Regions bin. And it's just simply called Clips now. All of the functionality, even everything you find in the drop-down menu, it's all going to be the same exact information. It's just simply the name has changed to keep it in line with the nomenclature of Avid and their Avid video editing systems. Let's actually go back to Daba 1 second. Some really important stuff while you're here as well. So we just got the files. The files are already downloaded. I can see them. They're there in my download manager. Cool. So I've got the files. Now there's going to be some other important information if we scroll down here, though. Under your FAQ, frequently asked questions. Under frequently asked questions, we want to find out the tempo information. I can see it's 117 beats per minute. And I also see the key information. It's in the key of F minor. That's going to be important as well because we're also going to show you some assets that you can actually use in your track to complement your remix. So we'll show you that here in a moment. Let's go take a look at these files. I'm actually going to rename the files and get them to their correct location. And then we'll show you how to go ahead and get them over into Pro Tools. All right, so these files should be in my Downloads folder. We'll go ahead and open my Downloads folder. And here are the files. Now, because I have a premium account, it's named the file slightly different, so I'm actually going to go back and change some of that information out of there. And I also want to make things capital like I would normally find them. Dynasty Electric looks like it's going to be the name of the artist. And then the name of the song is And I believe the rest of the information I can go ahead and delete. Yep, I don't really need the rest of this. Now, the reason I'm going to go ahead and rename this is because I'm actually going to archive this. I'm going to show you some locations where I store my files. But before we do that, let's add some of that information. We said that the tempo was 117 beats per minute, or actually over in Daba, it referred to it as BPM, which stands for beats per minute. We're looking right here at the center of our screen. That's going to be pretty important, so we're going to need to know that. Let's take a look and let's put that into the file itself. So the BPM is 117 beats per minute. And I believe it was an F minor. Let's take a look real quick. Yes, F minor. So let's add that to the file name as well. Now, the reason I went ahead and named these is because now I'll have my own copy of these files. And let me show you what I do with these. You want to go over here in your music folder, and you want to create your own folder here called Artist Remix Files. Now, inside this Artist Remix Files, you can see I've stored basically everything that I've been working on in the past couple years. So here's our new files. So they're in their own location, and they'll be there for us to import. So again, the location you want to do that in is music files, artist remix files. Notice I've got a Pro Tools folder. This is where all my Pro Tools sessions are going to be stored. So when I go to save the session, you'll see me point back to this folder. And then any of the samples that we use, I've created a separate folder called Sounds and Samples. So real quickly, let's actually talk about the samples and where you're going to get these samples from, because we've got 8.5 gigs worth of loop libraries we want to make sure that you have. If you go ahead and you navigate to your Avid account and you log into your account, now once you are logged into your account, you want to go over here to underneath My Products and check off View My Product Details. And in the actual Pro Tools section here, depending on what version of Pro Tools you have, you want to go to the Download section. And here's where you'll see all these Big Fish libraries. So these Big Fish libraries, you can download them individually one at a time, or if you happen to have your installation disc, they're located on a DVD on that installation disc as well. And I've gone ahead and downloaded all those files, so you can see all of these files are already downloaded, and I put them inside my Sounds and Samples folder in a folder called Avid Materials. So here you can see all of the files and folders that we just downloaded. And I believe this is 8.5 gigs worth of material. Let's take a look here. Command-I. Yeah, 8.55 gigs. So real nice, really cool loop library for you to use with your final project. Frederick brought up a good point. There are some instances where your BPM could vary a little bit, and there's ways that we can check that. So when we get our files into Pro Tools here in a moment, we'll take a look and we'll verify that they are exactly what it says they are. So let's go over to Pro Tools. I've got Pro Tools open. Let's go ahead and let's create a brand new Pro Tools session folder. So Command-N is the new folder dialog. And if you don't remember the quick key, that's okay. Once Pro Tools is open, just go to File and say New Session. And once you create a new session, it's going to ask you here, do you want to create a session from a template? And similar to Logic, you can have templates that you can set up here and templates that you can create on your own. Today, we're going to go ahead and create a blank session. You can pick your file type, broadcast wave or AIF. Your sample rate, I'm going to go ahead and stick with 44.1. Your bit depth, we'll go ahead and we'll use 32-bit float. You can choose basically whatever you want. I think the files we get are 16-bit. It's always better to actually use a higher bit depth than what the original files were. And you guys will know more about that because of your digital audio and theory course. We're going to stick with 24-bit, 44.1. And instead of using last used, you want to get in the habit of using stereo mixed. So here we're going to go ahead and create our blank session, and now we need to name the session. Well, I could have probably saved myself some time if I had gone over into my music folder, artist remix files. Goodness gracious, I forgot the name of the artist. Dynasty. Here we go. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. So we'll just take this and copy it. Command C, name of the session, Command V. You just need to make sure we save it back to the correct location. So our music folder, I've created a brand new folder in here, which I recommend you guys do as well. Pro Tools. And this is where we're going to save our session. Excellent. We got a blank session. We need to get our files into Pro Tools. Let's go ahead and let's import them. So File, Import, and we'll go to Audio. Navigate back to the artist remix files. We're going to go find Dynasty Electric. Here is the artist files we just downloaded. If you select one file, it gives you information about the file within the import window. When you select multiple files, it actually doesn't. This information you see here will go away. Now you have the option of adding or copying. You always want to copy. That way you're preserving the originals and leaving those there. Frederick's asking a good question. It had to do with what is floating point. Floating point has to do with the math architecture between 24-bit and 32-bit float. 32-bit float actually gives you a better headroom. There's a whole article about that I thought you guys went over in your digital audio and theory course, but unfortunately we just don't have time to review that tonight. Basically, floating point reserves extra bits that can be utilized at another point. In other words, they're floating bits that are floating around waiting to be used. It's actually kind of a complicated topic to really just delve into at the moment, Frederick. If you want, I've got plenty of literature to send your way, and we'll get down the specifics between what fixed math and what floating point math is. But it has to do with basically allowing the decimal point to be able to float, and that decimal point being able to float allows you to shuffle the arrangement of the way you would utilize your bit information when recording the audio. Again, a little bit more of a deeper topic than what we have time for today, but still a good question nonetheless. All right, so again, you want to make sure that whenever you're importing your files, you choose copy, not add. If you're adding them, it's leaving them in their original location, whereas copy is now going to put a direct copy of these files into my audio files folder of my current session. And that way it'll reserve the original files for another time. So we'll go ahead here and we'll import these files. Frederick, I appreciate you pointing out that we could change the BPM before importing them, but I have some specific examples I would like to use and show the class in an effort to show you why you need to get the tempo correct and why it could be adjusting. So just hold off if you don't mind, and if you have any other questions, we'll get to them at the end of class. You can see here it's defaulting back to the audio files folder of my current session, so there's no reason to change that information. It's simply going to copy the files that we're importing back to the audio files folder of my current Pro Tools session. Now, once these files get copied over, what's happening right now is they're originally 16-bit files, and Pro Tools is now making them match what our session parameters were. And our session parameter was 32-bit float, 44.1. So the sample rate's probably not going to change, but the bit depth definitely is. Now here we have the option of sending it to our clips list, which will put all the files here in our clips list. But since we're getting started for the day, we might as well go ahead and just send these to a brand new track. That way we can get started on these files. Excellent. Now, one of the first things that we do need to take a look at is actually dealing with the tempo information of this song. Now, they already gave us a tempo of 117 beats per minute, but let me kind of expound on why this is an important feature. Utilizing the grid inside of your DAW is going to be one of the most important features that you're ever going to do with inside of any DAW. And while there's nothing sexy about a set of lines, it's what you do with these set of lines, or what I mean by the set of lines is the grid. Right now, you can currently see my grid is somewhat translucent. You can actually see the grid behind Pro Tools. If I were to create several extra tracks, you can see the grid here inside of Pro Tools, but the grid does not currently reflect what the song truly is. We'll go ahead and we'll delete these tracks. I just simply created those tracks that way you could see the way those tracks would show you the grid without them having to be translucent throughout the waveform. So what I want to do here is create a click track and allow you to simply listen to the drums with the click track itself. And I already know we're going to have a problem. The problem is going to be the current tempo. But let's go ahead and we'll set up a click track. You'll go to your tracks menu, create click track. It'll create a mono aux track and place the click plugin on there. Command 1 will bring up our transport, and you can see that our MIDI metronome is ready and already engaged. Number 7 on your numeric keypad will disengage or engage your metronome. That way, if you want to turn it on or off. And numeric key 1, that's command 1, will show or hide the transport. So with my click track and the drums, if the tempo is correct, we should hear these in unison. But I happen to know we're already going to have an issue with this. In fact, let's just show off the drums and the click track. And we can actually take a look at Pro Tools Grid as well. And while you can see the grid gets kind of close, it's definitely not going to be dead on. Let's go ahead and listen to just the drums with the click track and see what this sounds like. I already happen to know it's going to be terrible, but we've got to prove the point. Yeah, it's a mess. It's a wreck. It's all over the place. It's because the grid of Pro Tools doesn't currently match what the current audio was recorded to, the original tempo of the original audio. So this was the reason why I took down the information of the beats per minute, or BPM, which stands for beats per minute. So let's go ahead and change that now. You'll go up to your ruler view, and if your tempo view is not in view, simply use the drop-down menu. Maybe yours looks something like this. And if this is the case, you're not viewing the actual tempo. So here you want to actually see your tempo. And once you've got your tempo, you've got this little icon here. And this is basically a little triangular icon that is denoting your tempo. Control click it, and you'll be presented with a way to change your tempo. We were told it was 117 beats per minute. So let's go ahead and put in 117. All right, now just by looking at the grid alone, you can already see that the grid lines up. So if we go back and we listen to our click now, I think we're going to be happy. But let's go ahead and listen to it. That way we have an auditory representation of what it is we should be listening for. All right, so our grid is dead on. Now, it works at the beginning of the song, so where you've really got to test it is going all the way to the very end of the song. We know it works at the beginning, so if it works at the beginning, it should work throughout the entirety of the song, but let's make sure it works at the end as well. All right, sure enough, it's dead on. Now, why is this important? Well, because once you have your grid locked up, I can now take apart this audio and put it back together in a way that it never was before. Let's take a look at what I'm talking about. For instance, let's go grab ourselves just the beginning of the song here. Let's grab ourselves 4 bars of the original beat. So notice here when I go to grab 4 bars and I put myself into grid mode and I click and drag, it automatically lines up with the beat itself. And notice I automatically have 4 bars. So if I engage loop playback, which is your little playhead symbol that's on your transport, you can engage that by hitting numeric key 4 if you've got a full keypad, or you can simply just right-click on it and choose to turn on loop playback. Now, when I go to loop this should loop flawlessly. And while that's not going to be the impressive part, it's going to be what I do with this here in a second. Let's just make sure this loops flawlessly. All right, loops flawlessly. So let's say I just take this 4-bar loop here, and let's just keep this 4-bar loop and get rid of the rest of it. Now, I'll probably come back to using these drums for other parts here, but I just want to prove a point here about why the actual tempo and getting your grid to lock up is one of the most important things inside of any DAW. Command-T is going to keep just what I had in my selection and get rid of the rest. Now, just to go back and show you what I did, I could have simply separated this, Command-E, and then thrown away the beginning and thrown away the end. But instead, I just used Command-T. So I got the 4 bars that I wanted. So this is what I want, just what's in the selection. Command-T will trim to selection. It'll keep exactly what I have in my selection. now that I've got this 4 bars, let's pull this back to the very beginning of the song, and let's just do this. Let's leave bars 1 through 4 as they are, and let's have some fun with the next 4 bars. So in this next 4 bars, notice I'm going to keep myself in grid mode. I already know the grid's locking up. Let's put myself in 16th notes, and let's maybe do a double kick at the beginning. So all I'll do is highlight the kick and just duplicate it. Command D. And if you listen now, all we did is just give it a double kick. And it's dead on beat because the grid itself locked everything up. While that doesn't really look that impressive, it's what we could do with the rest of this. For instance, let's say maybe for these 4 bars, all I really wanted was hi-hats. So I could take my hi-hat information that I'm looking at here, and we could actually just rob this hi-hat information and replace some of the other spots here where I see that we have things like that kick. So if I wanted all hi-hats, I'll just separate it, I'll option drag it, and then we'll just paste it along. And here I've got nothing now but 4 bars of just the hi-hats. So okay, so maybe now I want to go and actually grab a kick. We'll go grab a kick from this other section here. And notice when I go grab the kick, it's automatically going to allow me to select just the kick piece because I'm in grid. We'll separate it, Command E, and I'll drag it up here. And now that I have just my own little hi-hat pattern, let's go and let's create our own pattern, leaving the hi-hats there, but maybe changing it up slightly. So maybe we'll do something along the lines of, we'll do a kick there. In fact, let's try for something that's a little bit more along the lines of breakbeat. So any of the selections I make, it's automatically going to select the drum parts I want. If I want to do, maybe we'll do double kick here. I'll do another kick there. We'll get a kick going there. And all I did is option drag to copy these parts. And if we listen to what I just created, so it sounds like we probably need to get a snare going in here, but basically you can see that you can rearrange anybody's loop just by basically putting yourself in grid mode and then taking it apart and putting it back together in a way that it did not originally exist. So let's leave the original alone and let's go ahead and have some more fun with this. Just showing you some examples of some things that you could do once you've got the grid locked up in Pro Tools. So what I'm going to do here is I know we've got our kick here. I believe this is going to be our snare. All right, so let's just do our own fun with kick and snare. We'll do double kick here. We'll leave our snare there. We'll do an offsetted kick here and keep the hi-hats going through this section. Notice I'm just highlighting the hi-hats and just Command D and just pasting right over top of them. And by doing this, I basically just alter the rhythm slightly. Now, the beginning there had a bit of that crash in it. You can see this long bit has a crash in it. So that long crash, we probably want to replace with just a straight-up kick hit, something like this. That way we could probably get rid of that long crash. There we go. Because we were getting basically a double crash sound going on. If we want to create basically something like a rolled effect, notice I could take this individual kick here and just duplicate it several times. And then consolidate it, Shift Option 3. Create maybe a little fade in on this, and this will give us a little ramped up roll effect. We'll go ahead and take a listen, see what it sounds like. Or check that out, we could maybe even do the inverse. Let's find our little snare piece again. So there's our snare. Maybe if we wanted to do a snare roll, we could maybe give it even somewhat of a delayed effect. So all I did was just duplicate that piece, then consolidate it, and then create a fade out. Maybe even take that kick here and put this in some other spots. We'll just shift it around. We'll put another kick there where the snare usually would be. Or what the heck, we'll just do double kicks here. Maybe even give it a little double snare here right before. So all I'm doing is I'm just really having fun by grabbing some parts and just duplicating over top of other parts, but just trying to be creative. Grabbing kicks here, just putting them where they did not originally exist. And basically what I'm going to end up doing is creating my own drum pattern out of somebody else's drum pattern. Let's go back and just listen to what I've done in this one little section here. So in this 4 bars, we left the original 4 bars, let's listen to it. So we've got the original 4 bars. You can see the 4 bars that I kind of just sat there and haphazardly played with it. But I played with it in a very artistic way. Once the grid's locked up, you can use your grid mode to start taking apart the audio and putting it back together in ways that didn't exist. So let's listen to the original and then the little edited bit that I just did. So right there in just one little section, you guys saw me just kind of playing around with it. Let's take the original, we'll drag it over here. I'm option dragging it, by the way. Option dragging it, copied it. So if we go back and we look, there's the original, here's the one I just copied. Let's just have a little more fun with this for a second, and then we'll move on. I just kind of want to impress upon you, all these edits that you're seeing me do, it's not possible to do these kind of edits without locking up the audio to the grid. And while we've had just fun just playing around with this one little drum loop here, think of the possibilities of what we could do with editing vocals in the same way. We'll do that here in a second, but I just kind of want to have a little bit more fun with this. Remember, this had this big crash in it, so I'm going to stay away from that because that big crash is going to creep up in everything. But I know that we've got, this is a big beefy kick here. So if I wanted to rearrange this slightly, we could just separate that kick, maybe even pull this kick to happen twice here. Maybe even just double up our snare here again. Maybe have fun with the hi-hats through a little section. Just get a little hi-hats going so it just sounds all kind of raw. Only to go back and snag our kick drum. In fact, we'll do this. Oops, sorry. We'll duplicate this out a couple more times so we have just the hi-hats through this one section. And then just take the kick and create basically your own drum pattern with it. It doesn't have to be the same pattern as what we were just listening to earlier. And I'm just basically having some artistic fun and leisure with this. Again, if we wanted to be just really stark through a section and do nothing but hats, we could change this up just a little bit and duplicate some sections. Here's a really cool trick I like to do. I like to actually reverse some sections too. So how about we take this one whole kick here, go underneath Audio Suite, go down to Other, we'll go down and find Reverse, and we'll render this, and that just reversed that section there. Maybe just for fun, we'll do it to a couple of these other kicks too. We'll reverse that kick. And maybe, oh, I don't know, why not reverse that one as well? Or even some of these hats. We'll reverse that hat, and we'll reverse this hat. And another really cool effect I like to show you here is this little deal that's called Verify. You can find Verify under Audio Suite, under Pitch Shift. Oops, Pitch Shift, Verify. This is going to give it a record stop effect. It'll sound really cool. I'll play it back just so you can kind of see what it sounds like. And let's listen to what I just did, just in the one little section, just playing around again. So. Listen back from the original so you can just hear what we've done so far. So So you get the idea. You can really get really creative with this. So the whole idea is that you have to lock up your grid with your audio. In any DAW, if you don't have the grid locked up, you basically just have a very fancy tape deck that shows you pretty little waveforms. So now we showed you here just a little bit playing around with the drums. Let's actually get rid of the drums altogether. And at some point we're gonna drag in some of the loops from what we heard earlier. So let's do this. Now, I created all these edits. I really could keep some of this stuff if I wanted to. The point that I was trying to make here is you've got to lock up your grid. The grid does have to be locked up in any DAW, and once you do, you unlock the power of that DAW. Again, notice that I went to go grab any piece, and it went and grabbed that individual drum hit. So then I can take that drum hit and do whatever I want with it, which is really, really cool. It opens up a lot of possibilities for you. Okay, let's do this. Let's get the original drums back to where they were. I can grab the drums here, just pull them back over into the track. Oops, they created a new track. Let's try that again. Here is the original whole file. I see it's in bold, so I know that's the original file we imported. There's the original drums. And just for fun, let's actually show you some of the stuff I did with just the vocals here. So we'll leave their drums, and let's go pull up the vocals. Here's their vocal lead track. So with the vocal lead track now, if I wanted to do any kind of stutter edit, you may have heard this done in a lot of dance music. It's starting to become popular in hip-hop. But let's go ahead and let's just solo out a piece of these vocals and let you hear the vocal here.
It was like a dream, dancing in the stars to the beat of the drum machine.
So dancing to the stars to the beat of the drum machine, we could actually start delaying some of these vocals here or just putting some effects by just simply duplicating some parts. So imagine I took a sliver of, I heard dance and drum machine. Those are nice definitive parts. So let's listen to where these were. I believe they were here.
Beat of the drum machine.
So it was beat of the drum machine.
Of the drum machine.
Beat, I believe, was here.
Beat of the drum.
So if I wanted to do some cool effect with beat, let's go ahead and let's create a new stereo track right next to our lead vocal track. And if I wanted, I could take that one word and notice that when I go and highlight it, basically that one word is now, because I'm in grid mode and I've already locked up the grid, it highlighted that individual word. So I could separate it, option drag it down to my next track, and let's create some of those delayed effects that you heard me doing earlier. So notice I see it fits right in with where it originally was. So we could do something like, oh, let's try this. Let's actually try nicking the beginning of it. Here we'll hide some tracks so we can focus in on just the track that we're dealing with. We'll go and grab the beginning of this word. I'm just going to hardcore just edit this right out. Oops. Separate it, Command E. Drag it back a little bit further and duplicate it several times. We'll go ahead and then consolidate it into one long piece. Create a fade in for it. And then I really don't need it to double itself because right now what's going to happen is we're going to actually end up hearing it kind of loud because these two frequencies are the exact same frequency. So it might not be a bad idea for me to actually bring this track down just slightly. Otherwise, we're basically feeding in the same exact track. In fact, let's go ahead and just listen to it so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. I'll put it back up, and you'll hear that this one word is going to get pretty loud. So we're going to need to drop it down. But let's take a listen to what we got so far.
Stars to the beat of the stars to the beat of.
We'll give you a little bit more distance on it.
Stars to the beat of the drum machine. Stars to the beat of the drum machine.
So you can do a lot of really cool effects. That was kind of a lead-in little delayed, just stutter sound. And again, I set myself to 16th notes, and I just duplicated the beginning of it and brought it up to the beginning. We could have done the inverse of that as well. Let's undo the work that I just did. We could have stuttered that the beginning of the word drum machine away by just simply duplicating it several times. Consolidating them, Shift Option 3, and then creating a fade out. And here you'll get to hear it kind of delay it away.
Stars to the beat of the drum machine. Stars to the.
So this basically just gives you some more alternate methods. This is really what makes Pro Tools very powerful, is the audio editing capabilities in Pro Tools. It just becomes really quick and easy when you know how to use the tools. Okie doke here. Let's go ahead and get some of the materials into our song from the source materials that I want you guys to download coming from your DigiDesign site. So I'm going to go back and import some of those sounds. Let's go ahead and first undo some of the work that I just did. I'm just basically giving you guys some creative ideas and showing you some alternate uses once you've got your grid locked up. Because here in a little bit, I'm probably going to ditch all the original drums and start putting in my own drums. The drums here are bad, but we've got a loop library of drums, so why not try to utilize some of them? So I'd like to show you an alternate method of importing audio that you guys used on your first PTA assignment, and this alternate form of importing also is going to allow us to do something very, very cool, and that is to audition loops that may not be in the actual tempo of our session, but it'll automatically force them to be the tempo of our session. One thing that I find very odd about this session is noticing the very end of all these regions are all slightly different. Typically, I'd want to go back and listen to the entire song and make sure these all line up. In fact, just for references, I'm going to do a needle drop here and just make sure there's nothing wrong with these files.
I'm feeling it, yeah, yeah. I'm feeling it, yeah, I'm feeling it.
Okay, sounds good. Looks like the track's all fine. What concerned me is I'm looking at a bunch of different regions that end at the very end here, and they all end at different timings. That's kind of unusual for stems, but whoever tracked out these stems, they just basically gave us what they needed to and didn't finish out the end of some of these stems. Not a big deal. That's fine. At least they all fit and they're all in time. Frederick Vargas, you had a question. I will answer it. I want to try to hold off most questions till the end of the session, though. And Frederick, your question was regarding ghost regions. Your ghost regions could happen for a couple reasons. Number one, if you don't have an active output for any track, we just say here no output, you're going to find that that track now becomes grayed out because it does not have an active output. Give it an active output, and you'll see that it'll be just fine. Another reason a track could be grayed out is maybe you have that track muted. Command M to mute a track, and it's basically muting regions. Notice here, if I undo this, if I were to go in and I could mute every other drum hit if I wanted to. We'll go and change my grid resolution. I'll edit this out. I'll edit this out. We'll edit this out, and then we'll go ahead and we'll make these muted. So just Command M. Mute, mute, mute. So any region you see that are grayed, they could possibly be muted. But again, if you've got specific questions like that, Frederick, please get with me at the end of class, only because your questions, while they're very good ones, it's just going to impede the process, and I will give you time to answer any of these questions at the end of our session tonight. Excellent. Cool. Let's go ahead and let's do this. Let's get rid of these drums. So for right now, it's time for me to save a new version of my song. When I say I'm saving a new version, I want to do a save as. So let's go ahead and we'll do a file, save as. We had the original, so let's just call this V2. And I call the V02 because I never know. Several times I'll end up having up to 20 versions of a song. Frederick, hey, not a problem. No big deal. That wasn't a scold at all. It's nothing like that at all. But I will reserve time for you, and I promise you I'll get around to any questions you have. I absolutely want to answer any question you have. In fact, you've had very good questions so far. Thank you, and I appreciate it. All right, so V2, basically what this is going to do is it's going to save a new session file back to my audio files folder. And I'm going to do that because if I'm going to start deleting tracks, I want to make sure that I can get back to my original should I mess anything up really badly. For instance, we're going to go ahead and just delete the drum track for right now because I'm going to be kind of bold and jump out and go grab some of the drum tracks to use for this track because I want to kind of get started on it. So we'll say here we're going to go ahead and just delete this track. When we delete this track, this is it's not necessarily an undoable feature. In fact, whenever you delete tracks, your undo cue goes away inside of Pro Tools. So any Command Z's that I would want to do, I can't do. For instance, if I were to edit this region here and then delete this track, I can no longer Command Z and undo that edit that you just saw me do. Not a big deal because I get to use the trim tool and just pull it back out, but just letting you know that your undo cue will dissolve whenever you delete tracks. Now, I deleted that track for a reason. It's because I want to show you a new way of importing audio that you guys learned in your PTA 1 assignment, but there's some features to it that we didn't show off in your PTA 1 assignment, and I really want you to see how this works. So I can basically go grab any loop material that I want to and have it work inside of Pro Tools, whether it matches my current session tempo or not. I'm looking at a blank track here. I'm going to go ahead and delete that just to keep everything nice and tidy. So where do I find the workspace browser? You find it underneath your Windows menu, and you'll see you have workspace here. You can see the quick key is Option semicolon. Now the workspace browser, if you look at it, it looks a lot like the desktop of your Mac. It's going to allow you to basically crawl back through your Mac, but find files and import your files. So I'm going to go look through my Mac hard drive. I can now close this window. We'll go back and we'll look inside of users, which I'm going to be the primary user for the computer. And there's me. I'm the only user on this computer, John Berry. We go back into my music folder. And inside of my sounds and samples folder. Hang on a second while Pro Tools updates. Cool. Here's my sounds and samples. If I look under Avid Materials, remember the Avid Materials, this folder that I just entered into, let's take a look at that. This is that 8.5 gigs that I just showed you how to get from your Avid website or from your installation disks. Cool. Now, I noticed the tempo is 117 beats per minute, so we could kind of go for pop, we could go for R&B, we could go for rock or world. I'm sure we're going to find something in one of those genres that will fit this tempo. For right now, what the heck? Let's see if we got something inside of R&B and funk. So I'm looking inside an R&B and funk. We want to go down to percussion. And I've got miscellaneous percussion. Let's go back and let's find... Actually, I'm going to go back a step. And I'm going to look under drums. And under drums, notice I've got kick and snare. Or we could go find drum loops. Tell you what, for right now, I'm going to go back a folder and let's go find some loops of some kind. I could pull out individual hits and use those individual hits, but to just kind of get things started, a lot of times I'll just go ahead and I'll start using loops and then go back and use those loops, but use them actually as ghost notes. So I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about here. So here we're looking at the workspace browser. The workspace browser gives you an alternate method of importing your audio files. I typically almost always like to have my workspace browser open slightly. So typically I'll go ahead and I'll resize my windows just so it's always kind of sitting there for me. That way should I want to get to it. Now here's the really cool thing about the workspace browser. Up top here where you see this metronome symbol, as long as this is engaged and these files are trimmed, topped, and tailed correctly from the beginning and end points of their edits, they're going to loop inside of Pro Tools at the same tempo of the session, and I can audition them before I even import them over into Pro Tools. This will allow me to quickly and easily hear if something is going to work in context with my music. It happens really often to me that I'll go and I'll hear an audio loop, and I'll go, wow, that sounds really hot. I bet it sounds great in my song. I pull it over into my song only to find out contextually the way it fits in with my song, it doesn't fit as good as it did, as I thought it would in my head when I actually fit it in there. So what this is going to do is this is going to allow us to do that without importing it first. And then once we like a file, we can then import it. So notice as soon as I select a file, you can have it automatically audition, and these are found here. It's underneath this little icon here. If you right click, I've already checked off loop preview. That way, anytime I click on a loop, it's automatically going to start playing immediately. So I also have auto preview, and spacebar will toggle the on and off feature. So if I want to start it or stop it. So what I'm going to do is we're going to start the track. And remember, we got rid of the original drums, but then I'm going to go find some drums from our little list here. So we'll listen here. Actually, that one loop.
Dancing in the stars to the beat of the drum machine. Now here I go. I feel it in my body and my soul. And I know, you said no, that I can't take you down. And I know, you said no, that I can't take you euphoria. Euphoria, feeling euphoria tonight. Euphoria, euphoria, feeling euphoria tonight. I'm feeling you. I'm feeling you. I'm feeling.
Now, I already found a couple that I thought were just really simple intro loops, and if we take a listen here, these are the two parts. When I imported these, because I had the metronome symbol already checked off inside of my workspace browser, whenever it imported them, it understood that it wanted to automatically time stretch them to fit the current tempo. So now that I've imported them, I just simply drag them over to my tracks list. They now sit right inside of Pro Tools, and they now fit the actual tempo. If we go and we listen to these, I'm going to paste these out for a couple bars so you guys can actually hear what they sound like with the song, because there's nothing but really an intro going on there. But the original loop, I like this top loop, so let's mute this one. You can just kind of hear what it sounds like coming in. Add in my little second loop. So I like this as a little intro loop, so we'll go ahead and we'll name this intro loop. And then our little buddy over here wasn't too bad either, but I didn't think it was all that great. So if we were to listen to these two together, let's go ahead and let you listen to them, see what they sound like. Not bad. I like how the intro loop is super, super simple, and then this kind of picks it up right where the song starts to kick in a little bit. However, I don't think this is going to be heavy enough patterns to really give us a really strong groove. These are going to be fine as little ghost rhythms that I'll use in the background, but what I really want to do is find something really heavy hitting and strong. So let's go find, oh geez, I closed my workspace browser, didn't I? Yep, I did. That's okay. We'll just pull it back up. So let's see here. Option semicolon is our quick key. We'll go back into my Mac drive, back into users. Let me hide this and get it out of the way. Back into John Barry, back into my music folder. Scroll down to sounds and samples. I created an Avid materials folder, and we started off using the R&B. Let's go ahead and let's find something inside. Let's try DJ and dance, see what we got. We're going to go ahead and look under either drums or percussion. I see I've got some garage breaks. I've got some hardcore breakbeat. Let's see what the hardcore breakbeat stuff sounds like. It might sound terrible. I have no idea. We're just going to try it out here. And I'm going to go ahead and mute these two tracks that I already imported earlier. That way we can hear the raw tracks that I'm currently going to be using. Let's just audition them.
a tree, dancing in the stars to the beat of the drum machine. Now here I go, I feel it in my body and my soul. And I know, yes I know, that I take good time. And I know, yes I know, that I take good time. You know that, feeling it tonight. You know that, you know that, feeling it tonight. I'm feeling, yeah, yeah. I'm feeling, yeah, yeah. I'm feeling, yeah, yeah. I'm feeling, yeah, yeah. What's in your head? I just can't take anymore. So here I go. I run to the stage with the bright lights at the show. And I know, you said I can't take you there. And I know, you said I can't take you there. You know that, feeling high tonight. You know that, feeling high tonight. I'm feeling, yeah. I'm feeling, yeah. I'm feeling.
Okay, so I found a couple loops that I thought were pretty cool, and the question here, somebody asked if you have to use loops. No, you guys do not have to use loops. I'm simply showing you off some features concerning your workspace browser that will automatically make sure that any of the information before you even import it inside of Pro Tools, that it's playing back at the proper tempo as your session, so that you can hear it in context with your session before having imported it. It simply saves you several different steps. We will actually be showing you how to create your own beat using virtual instruments. It's just beyond the scope of today's lesson. And just remember, we still have 2 more weeks worth of material. So we're going to get there. And I won't be creating a beat from raw tonight, just showing you where to get your materials for your final project, as well as where to get loop materials so that you can use these inside of your final project. Now, I imported a couple new loops here. We'll listen to these guys back here. There's only this guy at the bottom. I actually only liked one part out of it, so I'm going to end up using, I believe it was the snare or clap sound. And then this loop above it, I just thought it sounded like a pretty decent loop. Let's actually drag it off here a little bit further down. We'll actually see what these two guys sound like. So if we listen to them in conjunction with each other, I think they're going to clash just a little bit, but let's listen to them. Now, in the context of a loop as well, remember, we can always go back and actually change this loop. So if I zoom in, Option F, anytime you have a selection. So I had a small selection there. I want to see it nice and large. Option F will zoom in. And of course, then you guys can resize your tracks to actually see this piece. So this is a pretty cool little breakbeat. I actually like this. It sounds pretty nice. If we listen to it just soloed out by itself. If we want to actually take that a little bit further, we could then use a bunch of the skills that we just showed you how to actually change this too. So if you want to leave the original alone and then do your own really cool edits to other parts of it. So for instance, we could set ourselves to 16th notes and then just go in and start whittling away at parts, like by reversing parts, Audio Suite Other, go down and we'll reverse this. Render that out. It's now reversed that one hit. You could also reverse the back end of this, render that out. Give ourselves on this version maybe a double hit on that kick when it comes in, or maybe even take some of these hat parts that we see here and replace some of the parts where we saw it was really busy. And I'm just basically grabbing hats from just some random spots where I see we've got hats, separating them, option dragging them to other sections of the song. And basically all I'm doing now is I'm changing up the pattern, the original pattern of the song. Maybe throw in some kicks here and then another kick there. And I'm just grabbing kicks from other spots. So in the event that I am using somebody else's loop, I could also totally hijack parts of it and make it nothing like the original. This way you can listen to the original and then the second version. So notice I basically created an A and B section for what was just basically a static loop and gave it an entirely different feel. We could do the same thing for this loop as well. Just showing you that once you've got something locked up, then you can take it apart and put it back together in a way that it just did not even originally exist. For instance, let's take this whole section here. We'll reverse that. Let's take that small section there, reverse that. We will, actually, I meant to leave the original alone. Let's leave the original alone so you hear what the original sounds like. And that way, we'll duplicate it a second time. I'll zoom in. And then that way you can hear the difference between the original versus what I'm doing to the actual performance. Maybe we'll grab this note, I'll edit it, I'll bring it up even one hit earlier, so we've doubled it up. I always love taking hat sections and putting them where they didn't originally exist, like a section there, and a section there, and that looks like a good section for some more hats. Again, maybe another double hit, where there were just nothing but hats originally. And so if we go back and listen, we just basically created an A and B section to what was a stagnant loop. So I know some people think, well, you're using a loop. That's totally cheating. Well, now when you hear the difference between the two, you realize that there are creative ways of using loops, but basically making and turning them into your own production. Let's listen back and see what we got. Throw that in with the song, and let's take a listen and see what we've got so far. So far, let's take a look. I created a little intro loop. Typically, I want to consolidate these two. That way I don't have to move around all these little tiny pieces. To consolidate is Shift Option 3. And basically with consolidation, you're pasting all these little files into one new file. You're creating basically what we call a brand new whole file. We'll go ahead and move this forward so we can hear what these guys actually sound like. Change my grid resolution. And to change my grid resolution, I held Control Option and use my plus minus keys. When I do that, you can see that this area up top here, this is what's changing. That way I can get it back to 1 bar increments. So when I go to move this stuff, it just simply snaps where I need it to snap. Cool. I tell you what, we already have these guys going. Let's move these back to where they were. Because I already have an A and B section going for my intro loops. So let's listen to what we got so far. We got these little intro loops here. And then we have a little bit chuggier loops that we've got. And I'm not even sure if we'll end up using this in the final, but it'll just be nice, good ghost loops for when we go to build onto it. So let's see what we got. I'm actually going to audition it with the rest of the composition. Okay, so it didn't sound too bad. It's kind of nice. This little part here could have come up in volume. It didn't quite have the impact of the loop ahead of it. But just giving you creative uses for what you can actually do once you've got the grid all locked up in Pro Tools. Understand the grid is one of the most important features of any DAW, and especially with Pro Tools, because now you see once you've got the grid in place, changing your grid resolution is all you really have to do, making sure that you're in grid mode, and then you can go in and basically take anybody else's loop materials and basically turn them into your own by reperforming what was just a stagnant loop and changing it and altering it to become more of your own. It's really done in a lot of dance music, hip hop, house music, jungle, all basically forms of house music or dance music. You're going to see these kind of techniques. They've really been predominant in breakbeat and jungle and that for a long time, but you're starting to hear these kind of producer tricks getting hijacked and pulled over into the hip hop world as well. So far we've just come up with a couple loops. Let's see here. Any questions so far on anything you guys have seen? This might be a good spot to take a break and see if we got some questions. Anybody have any questions on what they've seen so far? No questions so far. Any questions? Cool. A couple comments of people being impressed with Pro Tools. People being rest in peace Logic. That's funny. I get that one a lot. Hey, that's totally understandable, guys. If you feel like I'm going too fast, let me know. So far, just if I had to recap, I know you guys feel like I'm going really fast, but if I really had to succinctly recap what we've done, the only thing I've done so far is import some loops into Pro Tools and then show you guys that once you have the grid locked up, you can take apart the audio and put it back together in a way that it is not traditional. It wasn't originally played. Pardon me. It was not originally played that way. So I mean, you guys saw and heard some loops. All I did was import loops, make sure the grid was locked up. Once the grid's locked up, make sure you're in grid mode, change your grid mode, and then you can just zoom in on any of these loops and take them apart and put them back together in a way that they were not originally played. It's something that's very, very powerful about Pro Tools, and it's really overlooked. And until someone kind of opens up the curtain and shows you guys the power of Pro Tools, then Pro Tools seems really boring. And I don't knock Logic. Logic is a great application, but the audio editing in Logic, it's just not this way. It doesn't allow you to use a grid mode that will allow you to just go in and seamlessly pull out little tiny pieces and use them all over. You actually can do it. It just takes a little bit longer in Logic, but you are able to do it. It doesn't give you the one surface level way of doing it that we have here in Pro Tools. In fact, to be sample accurate inside of Logic, you actually have to enter what they call their audio hyper editor. So, okay, there was a question about BPM. BPM we're finding right up top here. It's right in your ruler view. If you're not seeing BPM, it means your tempo is not checked off here in this drop-down menu. So notice if that's not checked off, you're not going to see your tempo. So you want to go up top, this little I call it a calendar little icon view, and then just go check off tempo, and then you'll see it up at the top. Now to change your tempo, you want to control click on it. And then obviously you want to follow the tempo of whatever they're telling you inside of Daba, and this one happened to be 117 beats per minute. Well, I don't know if you guys noticed, but these files that we're using, take a look at some of the stuff that we just used. I'm going to cancel out of here. I want you guys to see some of the files that we used here, 130 beats per minute, 140 beats per minute, and I just threw them over into Pro Tools at 117 beats per minute. Not only that, I auditioned them first. Before pulling them into Pro Tools, I auditioned them at the correct tempo. So I know a lot of other DAWs are starting to do this as well, to where any loop will automatically match the tempo. This is the way that you would do it inside of Pro Tools. And it's always really, really handy because there's nothing more furious to think a loop is going to be hot. You're like, oh man, that's a juicy loop. I'm going to use that in my project. Only to have to import it in and then listen to it in your project, and it doesn't sound right inside of your project. In fact, when I go back and I listen, if I have to choose between the loops that I just pulled in, this last guy here, I just don't think it's going to make it. If you listen to the transition between these two, this guy here, these blue loops here that I messed around with, they don't quite mesh up volume-wise or intensity-wise with the bottom loops here that we're seeing. So I'll probably end up ditching these, or I'll actually use them in another creative way. Another creative way would be to actually filter them out and actually take some frequencies out of them and actually use them throughout the entirety of the song, but without you even really knowing they're there. What do I mean by that? Well, let's go ahead and show you. So first of all, let me audition them against one another so you can hear what it is that I'm talking about, because the blue guys sound pretty nice and strong. Once you get here, it sounds lacking. Let's listen again.
The stars to the beat of the drum machine.
Okay, so the yellow guys are still kind of cool, but sonically they're not standing up at all. These guys right here are really punching through the mix, whereas these guys are sounding really laid back. So what I could do is I could actually sneak them in throughout the entirety of the song without even realizing it by doing some crafty little EQ work. Like, for instance, we could get rid of the low end and the high end and just make it kind of a mid-range sound. So if we pull up Audio Suite and go to EQ, let's pull up, Audio Suite, EQ. Let's pull up the old 7-band EQ. And this will let us preview it. And as I preview it, I'm going to roll off the bottom end. All right, so the bottom is gone. Let's see what happens when we get rid of the top. Maybe put a little bit of the top back, just a little bit. Okay, oops, I didn't mean to do that. I just got rid of my settings. That's okay, I can get it back pretty quickly. Didn't mean to close out of it. All I did is basically we're looking at an EQ here. Whenever you're looking at an EQ, everything on the left side is always going to represent the low end. Everything on the right side is always going to deal with your high end. In fact, if you look at some of the symbols here, I'll kind of dispel what these symbols mean. This symbol right here is showing me that I could actually push the low end up, which would show you the curve going up, or I could suck some of the low end out. So notice the Y symbol, the Y laying on its side. You're seeing half of that Y symbol by me sucking out the low end. There you go. Or pushing the low end. There you go. So that basically lets you know what that symbol means. If we look over at our high end, we basically have the same thing. Let me null this out so we have it back to unity gain. We can push the frequencies on the highs. Here you can see the same symbol that is showing up here. Or we can suck those frequencies out. showing you half that Y again, but showing you the frequencies going away. And so if I play this back, I don't want to play it back pushing the highs really high because in my room it'll take my head off. But it's just showing you what these symbols mean. And if we turn into a bell curve means, well, you could either push it up or push it down, and that's showing you your bell curve there. What I decided to do was actually take off and give us a high pass here. High pass meaning it will cut the lows. So then I took us way down, and then I ended up cutting the highs as well. And it basically left us with this really ghostly little loop here. We listen back to it again. We'll go ahead and bypass it or audition it. So I'm going to render that down, and I'm not going to put that back at the very beginning of the song and have that go throughout the entirety of the song. We'll just go ahead and duplicate that all the way out. And what that did is it just kind of gave a little ghost rhythm that's happening in the background. We'll go ahead and duplicate it 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Shift return. Shift return is going to select back the beginning. That way I can duplicate 3 more times, or just duplicate out to the end of the song. Now I've got that ghost note there, the little ghost hit, as well as my 2 other loops. Let's listen to them all together. In fact, let me let you listen to just the percussion so far so you can hear what we've done so far today. And in fact, this guy is just a little overpowering. So we're going to have to bring him down in the mix. And I'm noticing this doesn't have any real kick to it either, which is fine. We'll go find our own kick and add it in. In fact, we should probably do that pretty quickly here. Get ourselves started with a good kick and snare. What I actually really liked about this was the actual clap, the snare in this. And when you listen to these 2 guys together, they don't sound too bad together at all. So let's actually go find a good solid kick and listen to it with the song. And I'm again going to revert back to the libraries that we were using. And all I'm really looking for is a nice punchy kick to fill in where this kick is lacking. And so I'm going to go find an individual hit and use it along with the loop to help support the loop. So first we'll play the song back. We'll start finding some loops. Actually, let's unsolo these parts so we can hear everything.
Dancing in the stars to the beat of the drum machine. Now here I go. I feel it in my body and my soul. And I know we said no, it can't take me down. And I know we said no, it can't take me down. You glory, yeah, you glory, yeah, tonight. You glory, yeah, you glory, yeah, feeling you glory, yeah, tonight. I'm feeling it, yeah, yeah. I'm feeling it, yeah, yeah. I'm feeling it.
All right, I found my kick. I dropped it in here. We've got it back at the beginning. All I really need is one individual kick, though. I don't really need the rest of it. So basically, I can get rid of the rest of this file. And we can go grab this kick now, and let's actually drag it over to where our loop is at, and let's follow the pattern of the loop that I created. Let's see here. So here we are. And as soon as this actually kicks in, I've noticed I don't really need the rest of that. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to just follow the kick pattern. How am I going to do that? Well, we'll just solo this out, and every time I hear a hard kick where there needs to be a hard kick, I'm going to drop in my new kick. So we're basically just listening for this loop and wherever the actual kicks happen. So what I probably should do is hide everything except for the tracks that we're dealing with. Let's call our track kick. Go ahead and name it. I just double-clicked kick. We're going to hide every track except for the tracks that we're using. And this way it'll help us just to see the parts that we need to see. So play the loop back, and I'm basically just going to copy this kick every time I hear a spot where the kick lands. Cool, I've got my kick pattern now. Now, for this particular piece, I really don't need that low-end information anymore. So I typically will actually just go every single place where I see the original kick and actually drop it out and just get rid of it. Every single spot where I just replace the kick, it doesn't need to be there. Actually, I might leave a little bit of the tail end of this just to give it that little bit of air. You can see all I've really done is now I've gone in and just basically robbed any spot where the original kick was. It's now gone. Leave that because there's a little bit of hi-hat information going on there. And if you listen back, here's the same pattern now without their kick. Put that back into the song here. Let's go ahead and consolidate this. Shift Option 3, so I've got my kick pattern. And do the same for the bottom piece. That way I'm just not having to shuffle around pieces. Shift Option 3. And now I can paste that out. Now the only thing that I would have to do differently is remember I did change up the pattern on this with my kick. So I'm going to basically have to do the same thing with my kick here. So let's go nick a kick. Pun intended, nick a kick. And do the same thing here. So I basically have to listen to it. Oh, you know what? I didn't copy that kick. Sorry. Grab it, Option drag. I could have done Command C, Command V, but notice I'm just Option dragging to copy it wherever I need to actually put it where I hear that a kick should be. So. This is interesting. Remember, in this one spot here, I actually reversed it. So we're going to have to put a kick here and then reverse one. Just to mimic the same exact pattern. So Audio Suite, Other, Reverse, Render. And since that's a reversed one there, I believe I have a reversed one here as well. So if we go back and we get rid of, again, every spot where we put a kick in, we can go ahead and drop it out. Notice I'm keeping the back end of some of this, otherwise it starts sounding really choppy. You kind of need that open air of ambience that was in the original sample. Otherwise, and even still, it starts to sound kind of stark because we're entirely dropping out where original pieces used to be. But just to give you a quick glimpse of what you're looking to do, let's go ahead and consolidate this. Shift Option 3. Do the same thing on our bottom piece here. Just select in grid mode all the way across. Shift Option 3. And now I basically have the same pattern, but I've taken out their kick and I've got my own kick injected. Cool. Throw that into the song, and now we've really got something moving. So let's go ahead and let's show all our tracks again. We'll show these 2 tracks that we just created. Change our grid resolution. Now, I'm probably going to change it up, but just for right now, I'm just showing I'm going to paste it out to the end of the song. And we've pretty much just gotten rid of the percussion. Of course, I'm going to go and do a lot more to it, but just kind of giving you a wet your whistle kind of way of showing you some of the really cool features of just the audio editing alone inside of Pro Tools. So let's go back and just listen to what we've already got. You got the idea, at least for this evening. So I tell you what, guys, we've only got like 10 minutes left. I will promise you guys I'd give you guys ample time for question and answers. So let's talk about anything that you guys have seen me do tonight. So far, really, the only thing we've done, the most important thing, was showing you how to get things to line up with your grid. Once the grid lines up with Pro Tools, you guys will realize really quickly and easily it's easy to go and start taking things apart and putting it back together in a way that it wasn't even originally played and having it work out in your favor. So any of the features that you guys saw this evening that you might have questions about? Let me see if I missed some earlier questions. Sometimes the chat window is kind of small. Let's see. Can you show me? Brandon had an interesting question. Brandon asked, can you slow the tempo on just one track? Yes, you can, and you can do that a couple different ways. You could actually do it by time stretching. What do I mean by time stretching? Well, the loops that you saw me just create, let's do this. Let's show you those 2 tracks. I could have done a feature something like this. I could have time stretched. What I mean by that is I could have taken something and stretched it to become twice as long than its original length. What do I mean by that? Well, let me give you an example. For instance, let's take this guy, option drag him forward. Same thing with this guy. Oops. Option drag. Not where I meant to go. Here we go. Option drag. Cool. Option drag again. And I could take this time stretch tool that you have. It's underneath your trim tool. If you hold down your trim tool, you have this feature called TCE, which stands for time compression expansion, which would allow me to take this and actually just stretch it out and make it basically I just half the tempo. So if we go back and we just listen to this, you're going to hear this be basically just half time tempo. Now, somebody asked a quick question. Frederick asked, how did I get it to snap like that? I tell you what, the way you got it to snap like that has to do with the mode. Notice what mode I'm in. I'm in grid mode. In grid mode, notice it snaps to the grid increment. So no matter what, I know that I've already got the grid locked up, so that if I want to half time it, all I have to do is take the TCE tool and grab it, and it's going to snap to where it should go. I really can't even mess it up. And if you actually listen to this with the other loop that was right above it, it's actually going to create an interesting pattern because it's only half time, but it's still in time. So if we want to actually be creative, I could use that at the beginning of the song and just filter it out slightly. So we'll take both those, I'll option drag them, and I'm going to take both these, filter them out slightly so that they're there, just like you heard me do with the kind of the ghost beat. So we'll filter them out, we'll take out the lows and the highs. We'll just drop out a little of both so it won't make it as predominant. And that way when it drops into the song itself, it'll always appear as though it had been there, and it actually really was. We just had it filtered out, and we had it in halftime. I'll go ahead and I'll render this. We'll let you listen. I like that the small intro loop that we had at the very beginning of the song is really cool too. It's just the simplest little loop it was just one of the first loops I just happened to stumble across, and it actually just worked out really, really perfectly. We called it intro loop. There it is. So far, the only thing that we've got going on is just these three parts. We'll take a listen back. Let's solo these all out. Play it in with a song. Now we'll get the entire bed of the song behind it. So yeah, you actually can stretch any piece of audio, and I could have even stretched vocals as well. So the possibilities, once you get the grid locked up, you can take it apart and put it back together in a way that it's non-traditional. It's not the way that the original piece was originally performed or played, but now I can take it apart and by minutia put it back together in a way that makes sense and it's still musical. And notice that I really didn't have to work very hard. And the key goal into what I just did all night long had to go back with making sure the tempo was right. Once the tempo was right with the song, it allowed me to utilize my grid and start taking apart and putting back to the audio in different ways. Let's see. Can you please show editing a loop again? Moving the hat around within a loop. Yeah, I don't mind. Let me see what I got going on here. I can't remember if I did it for this section here, so let's just listen to what I have and see if we could do that here. So to give you an example of what I was showing you earlier, so here we just have a basic loop. And if we listen to this basic loop, this is actually the stretch loop. This is not a good example. Let's try, that's just the individual kick. Let's try these guys. And let's listen to these. Oh, cool. Good simple loop. Let's do it with the, notice the snare in this is a little bit more of a rim shot than a true snare. But I could take that snare and I can start moving it around in different positions. So let's zoom in on just the two bars that I have so you can kind of get an idea of what I was talking about. So notice right now, and I'm going to create a track underneath it just so you can see the grid. That'll really help you, I think, to see the grid. Now with the current grid value, and I'm in grid mode, when I go to make selections, notice it only wants to select the beginning or end. So I need to actually change the grid resolution to 16th notes. Notice that'll allow me to go and get these individual pieces like this hit here. There's that little stick hit that I was talking about. And with that stick hit, I can then duplicate the stick hit and make it happen several more times. Command D, Command D, Command D. Then when I go and consolidate that, and all I'm doing by consolidating is just trying to make it into one piece. But what that allowed me to do is create a small fade out. So if we go back and we listen to what just happened, take a listen. So when you saw me actually taking hat sections earlier, if I wanted the next section to have nothing but hats, then I would go in and I'd find sections where I've got hats. Like this looks like a pretty good section. I'd probably want to start here. Edit my hats, bring these forward. There's a little bit of a drum hit in there that I didn't want. I'm noticing here if I zoom in, look at that. I actually ended up cutting into a hit. So to get around that, I would grab a section where I don't have any hits, and actually probably want to do something more like this. We'll grab this one. This will be our first little hit. We'll grab these guys right after it. There's actually already some hats there, so let's separate these guys and option drag them there. I'm noticing for my hats, I already pretty much have a hat pattern going here. If I just were to duplicate this out, so now this whole section pretty much just has some hats in it. We'll go back and listen. Yeah, I could have done Command C and Command V. So, but I did option drag. To me, it's just a little bit easier to option drag something where I want it. I mean, you can really do whatever you want. So if I wanted to copy and paste it, Command C, and heck, I'll just put it at the beginning here. Command V. Now I have hats at the very beginning of the loop. That doesn't usually work out very good to have hats at the beginning of a loop, but you get the idea. You can put it wherever you want. Command V. Duplicate your heart away. It's going to be totally up to you what you guys want to do. I'm just trying to show you guys some extra creative ways. You want to take the beginning of this hit, separate it, put it in the middle here. You want to take the back end of this and move it to a new location. So I'm just really honestly showing you guys different possibilities of ways of making your own little arrangements inside of Pro Tools. And you guys are free to do really whatever you want. I just want to give you some creative liberties to really show you the possibilities of what this DAW can do. Yeah, so the grid resolution is very, very important. Gene just brought that up. The grid has pretty much, but your grid's not going to be accurate unless you have the tempo correct to start with. So it's going to be important that you actually do that. Yeah, option drag leaves it just as it is. Basically, you're just copying it, but you're dragging it to the new location while you're dragging it. Yeah, someone said something about glitching and stuttering at it. This is kind of the way it's been done for a long time. There's a lot of plugins that'll do this for you, but this is the manual way of doing it before they actually had these kind of plugins. Yeah, Command D to separate, and option click to drag. Usually you're going to have to separate something first before you start dragging it around, but that's the idea. So honestly, guys, all we really dove in tonight was a little bit of editing. I wanted to show you guys some importing and a new way of importing that allows you to audition with your stuff, with your materials, auditioning in the current tempo of the session, even though their original tempo was not that original tempo. Freeman, if you can't find your information, you can always log in with your Facebook account. That's usually the easier way. And if worse comes to worse, you can always create a new free Gmail account and just use that as your Daba. So there's a lot of different ways around it if you're having troubles with your Daba account. Well, listen, guys. Douglas had a question about fade. Shortcut for a fade. Fade has to do with having the smart tool engaged. With the smart tool engaged, which is this little bar up top, notice all three are now engaged. Here's what the smart tool does. The smart tool allows you to automatically, if I move down, it changes into the time grabber. If I move up, it becomes the selector tool. If I go to the leading left edge, trim tool, leading right edge, trim tool, leading right edge at the top, this will be your fade out. You just click and drag. Leading left top, fade in. And then if you're in between two regions, crossfade. Well, listen, guys, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for class tonight. I really appreciate you guys coming out and hanging out with me this evening. We're going to get a lot more in depth next week as we're going to be jumping in and starting to do some MIDI work and even to start to create our own beat and starting to mimic some of the parts that we're hearing. I really appreciate you guys coming out. It's been a great time hanging out with you guys. In the event that I went too fast, don't worry, guys. You will get this. I know it seems like your head's swimming. We've got the archive here for you. More importantly, if you watch those really short videos that we have, and especially the short videos for your prep session, the short videos that go along with your prep session, that was your PTA one that you guys just turned in on Sunday, please remember there's a video for those. If you watch the video, you're going to know how to do every single step. We actually give you a step-by-step video tutorial on how to do each of the 10 steps we're asking you to do. So make sure you watch those. That's key for doing well in this class. Of course, we want you to do the reading material and watch every single video. But if you watch those prep session videos, especially for that one assignment, that's really going to get you by with that particular assignment. Thanks for coming out and hanging out this week. This archive will be posted. You guys can find this. It will be posted on your announcements section. So just take a look. It usually takes me about 24 hours to get this rendered down and back up onto my own YouTube page, and it really has to do with the platform. It really has nothing to do with me being lazy. As soon as I stop our session tonight, the video has to get rendered down, so just understand that. And if you guys have any other questions or concerns, don't ever hesitate to hit me up. I love working with Pro Tools. I love helping you guys learn about Pro Tools, so hit me up. I'm usually on iChat every single day, and if not, leave me a phone message. But either way, in fact, if you guys have a personal question, I'm going to go ahead and pop up my iChat right now. And that way, in the event that you had a question, you were too embarrassed to ask in class, that's okay. I'll move my iChat off to the side here. I'll generally leave it up for about 10 minutes. And then if I don't get any questions, I'll generally quit out of my iChat. But if you need to get in touch with me, the iChat is audiovisionary@me.com. That's all one word, AUDIOVISIONARY@me.com. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and nail that up in here right now. Cool. So there you've got my iChat handle. Just hit me up via iChat, and I'll be there to answer any questions for about the next 10-15 minutes. It's my own evening as well, but I don't mind helping you guys out. I know there's going to be lots of questions. So thanks for coming out, guys. I'll see you guys back next Monday. And until then, keep plugging away with Pro Tools. Good night.